Men in Black, a novel by Steve Perry, based on the screen story and screenplay by Ed Solomon, protecting the Earth from the scum of the universe. Chapter 1. It was past midnight, and the state road was as quiet as the inside of a coffin buried 100 years. The South Texas summer skies were filled with stars, though pinpoints of light against the black current of a moonless night. The South Texas skies were also filled with a couple million insects: moths, mosquitoes, lightning bugs, June bugs, flying weevils, stray roaches, no-see-ums, and God knew what else. The bodies of a whole truckload of the suckers formed a gooey green and yellow paste on the windshield of the black '86 Ford LTD, where it sat, parked, next to a clump of something that might, if it was lucky, grow up to be a tumbleweed someday. The car was on a tiny hillock a couple 100 yards off the road, but the ground was hard and dry, only a little sand sprinkled over it. Easy enough for even a stock Ford to navigate on it. Not that the LTD was exactly stock. A mosquito buzzed from the hot night in through the Ford's open passenger window. Riding shotgun, Dee swatted at the mosquito. Damned bugs. Kay, the car's other occupant, sat behind the wheel, staring into the darkness. He said, "I hear that, partner." Both men wore white shirts, black ties, and black suits. Their black shoes were so shiny they could have been patent leather. Dee shook his head. He was the older of the two men, close to retirement age, and had a good 15 years on Kay. "This is no way for a grown man to make a living," Dee said. He swatted at the mosquito again, smashed it against the side of his neck, looked at the bloody spot on his palm with disgust, then wiped it on the windowsill. "It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it," Kay said. He looked at a pack of Camels on the dash with longing. Be easier to do the job with the smoke, but nope, couldn't risk the light being seen. Maybe even smelled. Out here in the boonies, odors traveled a long way. Too bad. "Sheet, you and John Wayne. You gonna tell me a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do?" "You wound me, Dee." Kay put a hand over his heart as if shot, glanced at the Camels again. Dee caught the look. He shook his head again. "You keep smoking them cigarettes and you're gonna wind up like the Duke did too." Like the Duke did too. He paused. "I'm getting too old for this, hoss." They'd been partners a long time. They knew how each other thought. "Ah, you were not old. You were just like a fine vintage wine, getting better with age." "Turning into vinegar, you mean." Dee, why you want to talk like that?" "Whoops. Hello." Kay reached for the ignition key. "Looky here. It's showtime, folks." In the flat distance, the lights of a lone vehicle gleamed on the state road. "You gonna wait for the boys in green?" "Just cranking the motor, but we want to time it right. Remember Canada?" Dee smiled. "Oh yeah, I thought I was going to throw an embolus, I was laughing so hard. That Mountie, I wonder whatever happened to him. Hell, he's probably running the country by now." "Wouldn't surprise me at all," Dee said. The Ford's engine caught with a rumble that was a lot more muscular than it ought to be for standard Detroit iron. As they watched, several sets of auto headlights flared on the road to their left. The vehicles, a couple of Ford WDs and late-model Chevrolets colored a sickly puke green, were lined up, blocking the road. They were close enough for Kay to read the INS logos on them. "Le Magara," they called them down here. The Border Patrol was awake and about to stem the tide of wetbacks. He grinned. Bush League guys. They didn't have a clue. Still, Kay felt a certain kinship with them, such that it was. The approaching vehicle slowed, came to a halt at the roadblock. Kay saw that it was a white van, a couple years old, covered with dust that had surely spent the morning in Mexico. Welcome to Estos Unundos, amigos. Everybody out of the car and nobody moves real quick. Kay put the Ford in gear. I owe Silver, he said. He looked at Dee and grinned again. You call me Tonto and I'm going to kick your sorry ass, Dee said. Kay chuckled as he hit the accelerator. The big Ford's tires spun him through dirt. The car headed toward the road. Hang on, Kay said. He tromped the brake, cut the wheel, and put the LTD into a slide, kicked up a lot of dust as the Ford skidded sideways and came to a stop behind the white van, both cars lit by the headlights of the Border Patrol's vehicles. There were a half-dozen INS boys, well, figuratively speaking, since one of them was a woman, spread out around the van. The Ford's arrival spooked them some, since about half of them pulled their pieces. Spooked, too, the dozen allegedly illegal Mexican immigrants standing behind the van where they were waiting for Ley Magera to finish busting their coyote before they all got sent back home. Life was hard and expensive, too. Dee and Kay got out of the Ford. Evening, gentlemen, Kay said. He held up his badge case with its ID so nobody would get trigger happy. We'll take it from here. A tall, good-looking kid of about 30 marched over to where Kay stood, shined his black aluminum 6-cell light at Kay's ID, squinting at it. I'm Agent Janus, the kid said. This is my operation. Who the hell are... He finally made out the ID. You are INS. Division 6, Kay said. He pocketed the badge case. I never heard of Division 6. Really. You need to pay more attention to the memos from HQ, son. We selectively monitor field operations. Nobody told me... I'm glad to hear that, because if they had, they'd be in a lot of trouble. These little inspections are supposed to be a surprise. Now you stand back and let us have a few words with these folks. It was all in your attitude, Kay knew. Act like you were in charge, and 9 times out of 10, whoever was on the scene would let you take over without much of a fight. The 10th time, well, there were ways around that if you were who Kay was. The Mexicans stood in a line nervously, a group ranging in age from a babe in arms to a couple of grannies. What do you think, Dee? Dee walked along the line, looking carefully at the illegals. Tough call. Guess we are going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. Kay nodded. He moved to the first man in line, a tall man in jeans and a t-shirt and tire sandals. ¿Qué pasa, amigo? ¿Cómo se llama? What's happening, pal? What's your name? Miguel, the man said. Kay smiled, moved on. To one of the grannies he said, No se preocupa, Abula. Benevidia e los Estados Unidos. Don't worry, grandmother. Welcome to the U.S. Gracious, senor, she said. He kept up a patter of liquid Spanish as he went down the line, smiling and nodding at the group. How are you? What is your name? Where are you going? Welcome to the U.S. When he got to the 5th man, who smiled like an idiot, Kay turned and glanced at Dee, who nodded. Definitely possible. To the man, Kay said, still in Spanish, Hey friend, what say I break your face? The man's smile stayed pasted on, and he nodded. Kay and Dee exchanged glances. Dee said, Maybe he's just a masochist, into pain. I know what a masochist is, Kay said. You don't understand a word of this, do you, friend? Kay said, still using Spanish. The man smiled and nodded. Some of the other illegals frowned at their comrade. From his appearance, the man was obviously not of pure Indio blood, so he should certainly be able to understand what Ley Magera had just said, and it was apparent he did not. One of the grannies made the sign of the cross. Folks, I do believe we have a winner, Kay said, glancing at Dee yet again. In Spanish, he said, The rest of you are free to go. Back into the van and scram. Janus, not unexpectedly, took exception. What? You can't do that. Son, I can do just about anything I want here. This is a Special Division 6 operation, and if you give me any flack, you are going to be riding a sway-back donkey down on the Rio Grande for the next 5 years, where the most exciting thing you'll see all day will be a lizard taking a leak. Janus paled, visible even in the dim light. All in the attitude. Act like you have the power, people believe you. The van's driver didn't wait to see who had the bigger cojones. He jumped into the van, yelled at his passengers who piled into the back. The van pulled around the roadblock block and sped north. This is highly irregular, Janus tried. Agent Janus, is it? A man who hasn't been able to take a dump for 4 days is highly irregular? We do this kind of thing all the time. Now you run along and let us deal with Paco here, and keep this to yourselves. We like to maintain a low profile in Division 6. The INS stood their ground. Kay said, "Go on. Up to now, your files are clean. Don't make me have to send a memo to your chief." The moment held, but Kay had shooed away stronger men than Janus here. Janus broke, muttered something under his breath, probably obscene. Kay kept his face stern. Reluctantly, Janus and the other agents headed for their vehicles. Once they were gone, D and Kay looked at their captive. "This way, amigo," Kay said. "We need to have a few words with you." From beneath his coat, D pulled what looked like a Desert Eagle N44 mag and waved it at the captive. A major handgun. The Israel piece, even the stock ones, and this one didn't look quite like the basic out-of-the-box model. It had a few modifications. Quite unusual modifications at that. It was apparent that the illegal immigrant either understood English or the meaning of a big old gun pointed at him. He moved off the road and behind a couple of chrysoto bushes with the two men. Kay put an arm around the man's shoulders. "I think maybe you jumped off the bus in the wrong part of town, amigo. In fact, I'd bet dollars against pesos you are not from anywhere remotely near here." With that, Kay pulled the electronic stripper from his belt and triggered it, ran it down the front of the immigrant's clothes. The laser light flashed, and there came a sound, much like somebody undoing a heavy zipper. The immigrant's clothes peeled away from his body. Then his flesh peeled away from his body. What remained was a 5.5 feet tall creature covered with scales, snail-like tentacles, and eyes mounted on stalks. The only bit of camouflage remaining was the immigrant's head, mounted on a stick, held in the creature's tentacles. The fake head continued to smile and nod as the alien operated the controls on the other end of the rod. Kay shook his head. "Mikey, when did they let you out of jail?" The alien made a reply. It sounded like a combination of a lizard eating a moth and a jar full of angry wasps. Kay smiled. "Political refugee? Uh-huh, right. Do I look like I was born yesterday, Mikey?" D said, "You know how many treaty articles you've just violated?" Mikey gave out a lame squeak. D said, "Well, let's see. Unauthorized immigration, failure to document incollations, non-payment of landing fee, failure to obtain a proper visa. Ah, Mikey, the list goes on and on. You are in a lot of trouble, boy." Kay said, "Yep, and whoever dropped you in old Mexico is going to owe you a refund. At the very least, you should have gotten a language implant or one of them contraband universal translators. Can't trust anybody these days, can you, Mikey?" Mikey sputtered more noise, crunched a few moths, tried to rid himself of a few irritated wasps. Now, you know better than that. Don't insult us here, Mikey. That won't do you any good. You don't really want to add bribery to the charges, do you?" Kay said. Mikey shut up. Smartest thing he'd done all day. "Hand me the head and put out your tentacles. You know the drill," Kay ordered. "Good gosh!" somebody said from behind them. Kay and D turned, as did Mikey. In the starlight, Agent Janus stood there, gaping at them. "Well, shit," Kay said.